I have something I need to confess. I'm not a fan of the word normal. The word normal is something that I've heard be used throughout my entire life in a variety of different contexts. Admittedly, some are a little bit more appropriate than others, but more often than not, it sets a seemingly impossible standard for those who feel like they don't fit into the norms of a certain group. And one group that particularly struggles with the use of the word normal are people who are on the autism spectrum, myself included. Many people who are on this spectrum struggle with the use of the word normal because of the way it's presented in modern society. Merriam-Webster defines normal as conforming to a type, standard, or regular pattern, characterized by that which is considered usual, typical, or routine. Now, that's a very broad definition, considering normal is something that, in my opinion, is quite arbitrary. And I say that because what's normal for some people may not be normal for others. For example, I grew up in a Hispanic household in Miami, Florida, where we ate Hispanic foods, went to Hispanic restaurants, where we celebrated holidays in a Hispanic fashion, and because we're Cuban, we talked really, really loud. That was normal for me. But for a kid who lives on a farm in Arkansas in a town where there aren't any Hispanic people around, well, maybe that's not so normal for them. I moved to Buffalo, New York when I was 18, and when I got there, I came to find what I already believed to be true. Buffalo is nothing like Miami, Florida. In fact, it's so different that it might as well just be a different planet altogether. I remember that there were a couple of times where people asked me to use my inside voice, and I thought I was, because, well, talking that loudly was just how everybody talked where I was from. But for my friends in Buffalo, that was not the case. Therefore, for them, it wasn't normal. This is because normal is all about your perceived reality. And very few people have a perceived reality as unique and as interesting as people who are on the spectrum. Let's take a look at those who have Asperger's syndrome. All my life, I grew up with kids who had Asperger's and struggled so very much to fit in with those who didn't have Asperger's. That's because people with it have a very hard time properly communicating due to excessive shyness, social isolation, etc. When they are social, however, it's typically about something that they themselves like, and they'll talk about it even if no one else seems to be as interested as they are. Speaking from personal experience, I can tell you I myself am very guilty of this. Anyone who knows me knows that I can talk about things like comic books, movies, internet memes and the history behind them, famous world figures, famous people of the past and famous people of today, and just a bunch of random topics that you would never expect someone to have so much knowledge of. It's because I take so much pride in my interests, and I've kind of had a habit of oversharing those interests and getting ahead of myself, especially when it comes to talking about my favorite film of all time, Steven Spielberg's Jaws, an interest so deep that it earned me the nickname Shark Boy from some of my good friends. But all this was due to the lack of understanding of social cues, a common symptom found in people who have Asperger's. It's not something people with Asperger's ever fully understand. After all, Asperger's doesn't just go away. The most important thing to remember, though, is that it's not their fault. They can't help it. That's just how their brains are wired. Granted, Asperger's does come in various levels of functioning. Not everyone is as severe as somebody else. It's different for everyone. That's why it's called a spectrum. For people who are high functioning, they can typically maybe have it easier when talking to others and introducing themselves to new people, while those who are low functioning, well, they might have an unbelievably hard time doing something as simple as making direct eye contact. Some people learn to control these issues faster than others. Some people learn slower, and unfortunately, some people never learn at all. But for every struggle a child with Asperger's may have, I believe that no struggle for them is greater than the struggle of feeling normal. Kids with Asperger's tend to overthink and overanalyze things, sometimes more than teenagers who aren't even on the spectrum. I didn't think that was possible either, but here we are. Often putting too much thought and emotion into one thing that, in reality, is not really all that complex. When kids are at the age of being able to understand what their condition is and how that makes them different from everyone else, the first instinct, and I did this too, is to reject it. Kids hate the idea of being different. Most kids don't even really want to stand out. They just want to be in their own little corner of the world and have their own little space. Especially with kids who have a disorder that already makes them really shy. Kids are shy enough without Asperger's added on top of it, but because they want to be normal, it's a different struggle. Little do they know, however, that normal is all about who you are and what your experiences are. The problem is that we put such a huge emphasis on the word normal to the point where it almost has a connotation of implied superiority. And it's hard for people on the spectrum to fit that criteria because the criteria is different for everybody. And as the old saying goes, you can't please everyone. It's simply impossible to do, especially in today's culture. But kids with Asperger's certainly do try. The solution I propose is this. Teach kids and people in general that being normal isn't so cut and dry as everyone makes it out to be. Now, I'm not saying that we ban the use of the word normal or remove it from our vocabulary. Nothing like that. After all, in some instances, normal does have a very concrete definition. Like saying please and thank you to your waiter at a restaurant, or being polite to a person that you just met and wanting to make a good impression. Those are normal reactions to the given scenario. After all, there is a time and place for everything. And there are certain ways that you need to act in certain situations. So in that instance, normal does have a concrete definition and does have a proper place. But it's the definition of being normal as an individual that is not so straightforward. And that is something that we all need to understand. Because if we don't, then we're going to keep having kids try hard to fit into something that is fictitious. It's something that we just made up and we don't really understand. For people as a collective society, there is no concrete standard for who is normal. There's just people who are different, or in many cases, people who just aren't well. And to those people, we are the ones who aren't normal, because it's all a matter of perspective. So for anyone who's watching this and struggles with any form of autism, I ask you to take what I'm about to say and apply it to yourself. There is nothing wrong with being different. It's okay to not be like everyone else. Just because your brain functions at a different level than others, that doesn't make you any less capable than anyone else. Some of the most famous people of the past and even of today's day and age have been diagnosed as autistic. Steve Jobs, the co-founder of Apple, a multi-billion-dollar company. Albert Einstein, one of the most brilliant minds to have ever existed. Lionel Messi, arguably the greatest soccer player to have ever lived, and even the legendary actor Anthony Hopkins. All people who have made an impact and left their own mark on history. Now, this is where I need to be honest. When I say things aren't going to be easy, you're going to have a lot of ups and downs. Just like everyone else in life, you're going to struggle, and you're going to struggle to the point where you feel like you can't go any further. But it is essential that you see it through to the end. And don't be discouraged because you don't fit into a certain norm. Not fitting into norms can be a good thing. Be the first of who you are, and don't let anyone take that away from you. In the end, you decide who you want to be. That decision is yours and yours alone to make. And if you don't like who you are, then you have the ability to change that too. No one can tell you who you can and can't be. Don't let one word make you feel like you can't find or even be your true self. It's all up to you, and it always has been. So always understand that despite your differences, you are fine just the way that you are. And don't let anyone tell you that you can't do something because you're different. When people tell you that you can't do something, oftentimes it's because they think that they can't do it, and they want to project that feeling onto you because they don't want to see you do it because they can't do it either. Can you imagine what the world would be like today if everyone gave up on things because other people told them to? I know, at least in my personal experience, my life would have been very different from what it is now. Had I listened to all the naysayers throughout my life, I wouldn't have had the courage to have been among the first in my friend group to move out of their house on their own to another state, thousands of miles away from home, no less. I never would have realized my love for filmmaking, and I would have made all the short films that I'm so proud of. And I would have never met all the amazing people today in New York who I know will be a part of the next generation of the next great filmmakers. It's all about believing in yourself. And I was able to do all of this because I believed in myself. And I didn't worry about what other people had in mind for my future. So don't worry about what other people can't do. Focus on what you can and can't do. Know your limits and be yourself. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to having more discussions and sharing more ideas on topics like these and many more on ASPIKA Exchange. Thanks again, and I'll see you soon.